will this to be, and in this blessing I am free.
Make all spirits subject unto me.
Hello, I'm your grave-robbing magus, Dara Daza Crowley.
Alright, lads, it's Lee here. I'm just up visiting me nanny's grave.
And welcome to the Hocus Hole. How's your nanny doing?
She's in a casket.
Oh, fair enough. Is it comfortable?
I don't know, I'm not in it, am I?
Fair. How would
You're
know?
going to teach me how to ask her.
Yeah, well, that's what today's episode's all about. We're going to be talking about necromancy. Which, do you know anything about necromancy from, like, films or books or games or anything like that?
Zombies.
Just zombies?
Well, it's bringing people back to life and all that, and like, basically my whole idea of it is you take a dead body and like, right, come back to life and do this for me.
Yeah, kind of pretty much the gist of it.
Yeah.
Only...
That's the podcast?
Well, that's it. That's all what necromancy was.
Yeah, I was right.
No, yeah. I kind of wanted to do necromancy just because, by the way, this podcast is all about, democratizing ideas of magic. As you know, if you've listened to the introductory episode,
If you didn't, go back and listen to that first.
yeah,
Because you'll have no fucking clue what's going on here.
yeah. Well, each episode, I'm going to be talking about the occult and going to be telling Lee about the different concepts in the occult and of magic and stuff, because it's just something I've always been interested in and I've practiced. And
And I'm going to be seeing how frustrated I can make Deborah.
yeah, pretty much. It's going to drive me insane. We're going to talk about the history of necromancy. Then we're going to talk about kind of the different, how it developed over time and stuff. And then we're going to talk about, like, maybe a little bit of experiences that I've had with it. And disclaimer, this isn't some Burke and Hare shit. I have not, actually, anything I say, I'm not confirming or denying anything I've done here. Okay?
Dara allegedly brought loads of people back to life and caused COVID.
Anyway, will we dive right into it?
Yeah, let's go.
You ready? Buckle the fuck up. Well, before we get into a specific definition of necromancy, generally necromancy is talking to the dead. The idea of talking to the dead have been around in, like, since people were dying. You know what I mean? Since the very, very first person that died, the whole idea that someone is gone, the whole idea that we can still talk to them has always existed.
Imagine being the first person that died.
Yeah, where's that? Where's that Guinness World Book record?
Like, imagine being with the first person that died. Like, you're the one that stayed alive, and you're just like, John, what the fuck are you doing?
Get up! What are you doing? Don't be lying on the
fuck is this?
ground.
Why are you so cold? It's fucking 30 degrees. What?
Only animals die.
Gobshite.
Yeah, so every culture at some point had some form of ancestry worship. Okay, so the idea of worshipping people who had gone before you, you know what I mean? So it could be someone. It doesn't necessarily have to be your nanny or your granddad. It could just be someone who was, like, really important in the community. Do you know what I mean? Like, someone who was, I don't know, they were the baker of the community. They were the hunter of the community. You know what I mean? Someone integral to the community structure. Or it could just be a family member, But normally it kind of, a lot of cultures, it started off with, they had some important role in that society. But a lot of shamanistic and, like, animistic, the idea of animism is that everything has a soul. So, like, rocks, trees, this chair, your shoes.
Yeah.
A lot of religions still today, a lot of Pan-African religions, like Santeria, Vodou, and they see the idea of ancestry worship, because it's not just the idea of, like, your Uncle Joe dies, and you're like, all hail Uncle Joe, you're worshipping Uncle Joe. It's more so the worship part, I suppose. It's still really, like, embracing them and kind of like literally going to remembering them and having good memories about these people who've passed on. But a lot of the worship part is actually to do with gods, because a lot of different religions and belief systems that have ancestry worship, the whole idea of dead ancestors is them as a go-between gods. And to me, this actually makes a lot of sense because gods aren't human beings. You know what I mean? They're divine. Their whole point of a god is that they're beyond human. So how are they going to know what we want?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So the whole idea was like Uncle Joe. So you go up to Uncle Joe's grave or whatever. You're talking to Uncle Joe and be like, Uncle Joe, mind going up to the God fella?
Make an appointment there first.
Yeah, make an appointment there, and you explain to the God fella about my problem. Like only a human can understand human behavior.
Isn't the Native Americans the way they obviously they worship their former tribe leaders and stuff like that? That's technically necromancy, is it? As they're speaking to the dead.
No, it's not. We're gonna get there. Ancestry worship is kind of like the blueprint for necromancy.
Right.
You know, it all goes full circle. But this idea of the divine and the dead and the whole idea of their connection between one another, that pops up again in like even further back in ancient Mesopotamia. So you have the Babylonians, which they're going to be coming up on the podcast a lot. The mad lads,
You up the Babylonians?
yeah, Babylonians are mad for the hell magic. But so they believe that this is actually like I actually have in my notes here, just in brackets, metal, because this is metal. The Babylonians believe that human beings are made up of clay and blood of slain gods.
Right.
How cool is that?
Oh God.
They believe that this blood of the slain gods, right? That kind of it animated these clay bodies that are the human beings we are now. It was kind of like a powerless divine essence, but an essence of the god nonetheless. And that was known as, and this is going to be the first in this episode of many pronunciations of words from dead languages I'm going to butcher. Etemu, that's probably not right, but Etemu, so that literally means spirit. And because that was the first kind of instance, like it's written down in ancient Sumerian on tablets and all, that was the first kind of instance of, now obviously people have been believing this for forever, but that was the first kind of evidence that people did believe that a part of the soul survives beyond physical death and travels to the underworld. And their logic is, well, it's a part of a god, so of course it's able going to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You follow me so far?
Yeah, that makes sense. What about you, audience? You still here?
And that's where we kind of get to the whole idea of summoning spirits. You know what I mean? It's like, of course we're going to be able to summon them. You know what I mean? It's like it's their logic was it's a godly thing. Just like we can pray to gods and gods have power, we can harness that power for our own uses. So
It's a very human thing, isn't it? Taking something and being like,
yeah,
right,
exactly.
I'm
I
gonna
mean, that's
exert power over this now.
the law of nature, I suppose. Yeah, Babylonian magicians known as Manzazu. Someone needs to make a heavy metal occult band called Manzazu. But yeah, there's evidence on different tablets and stuff of them rising up spirits as spies and basically mainly just spying on their enemies and stuff like that. So we're go further up the timeline now. And all over the ancient world, like I'm talking everywhere, like Egypt, Greece, Rome, Scandinavia, like the whole idea of raising the spirits of the dead to gain knowledge is becoming pretty popular. And this is where the title of the episode comes from. This is where necromancy comes from. So necromancy actually comes from the word necromantia. Mantia meaning it's the Greek word for to divine. So, you know, like pyromancy, aeromancy, all different ways of like
I
divination.
like pyromancy.
Fire, air. Yeah, you little firebug. Shout out to all the pyromaniacs out there. Woo!
That's some fires.
Please don't. We do not endorse arson on this podcast. But yeah, so the Greek word necrosi, which basically means corpse, and mantia, divine, that kind of got mixed up together, and then basically just means that corpse divine, using corpses, the dead, to tell the future, you know. But it's a lot more, as we're going to see, it's a lot more than just telling the future. Now later on we will see that a lot of medieval texts and stuff like that, and a lot of necromancy is just the idea of like it's just generally evil magic. Yeah, necromancy often gets confused in medieval literature with this thing called necromancy, which kind of means black divination. We'll see later on that it was to do with Christianity, but that's kind of a lot of modern occultists now will kind of see necromancy as summoning demons. You know what I mean? Like different dark entities and stuff who are actually not dead spirits, but they appear as dead spirits.
Yeah.
Going back to actually talking to dead people. So as I was saying, all over the world, there's an idea of this thing called Nicaea. It's a Greek cult practice, which is basically conversing dead to see the future, which is basically what necromancy is. First mentioned by Homer, not Homer Simpson. But the Odyssey. You familiar with the Odyssey?
I am.
Oh yeah. Are you actually?
Yeah, I know Homer's Odyssey.
Oh
I
yeah.
know. I've never read it, but I know what it is, and I know the basic premise of it.
Yeah, it's a heavy read. But the so that was kind of like the first kind of as much as it was a cult practice, it's also like in a lot of plays and a lot of it's a trope in Greek literature, let's say.
So Homer was an occultist.
No, he wasn't, but it's just because the Odyssey borrows from a lot of mythology at the time, you know.
Fair.
But there is evidence in Greece that people were practicing like Nicaea, and basically like there was like entire cities that had little areas dedicated to this. Like this is such a cool name, the Necromantion of Acheron. That was in the region of Erepsis. And people actually believed that was just the doors of the underworld. Imagine waking up one day and just like, oh, I'm just heading down to the Necromantion. You know, yeah, I'll see you there. You floating Necromantion
A
later.
few demons and that, a few spirits.
Few spirits just gonna just slip through the doors of the underworld. You know.
Gonna say what's up to Hades.
Oh, we'll get to him.
Well, they would have all been obviously worshiping the Greek gods at that point, would they?
Yeah. So you have kind of the Hellenistic deities, like Teutonic deities and stuff. So deities that are to do with the underworld and to do with like death. Or they could just sometimes there's connections between earth deities and death because you go in the ground when you die. I mean,
Yeah.
And a lot of those temples were actually dedicated to those kind of gods. And we come back to gods again. Glad you mentioned that about the divine and dead and stuff. When we go back to, and this is what I was talking about, my favorite example of I think this is so cool, of like archaeological evidence for magic.
Yeah.
There's these things called curse tablets. That's just kind of, it's not an English translation. They're just called curse tablets, but the actual name for them is defixione. There's no English equivalent. But defixione were lead tablets with instructions, and they had like little messages carved on them, and they kind of like they could be dedicated to, they were basically lead tablets, sometimes clay, but most of the evidence has been found that they've been lead tablets that they had instructions for the dead on. You know what I mean? It was literally just like leaving a note out for a dead spirit. But sometimes they'd be dedicated to different gods, you know, like death deities. Where was I? Sorry, yeah, death deities and stuff. They would be like planted in the walls of. They've been found in the walls of certain temples dedicated to certain gods. Wells or places like for dedicated to a certain river spirit or whatever. But the most common place where they've been found is grave sites. Normally the graves of soldiers, the graves of people who've died quite violently. And they'd have like a task on it. So I actually have a really interesting example.
I would be
Um,
human.
What you mean, fuming? What would you be fuming?
If I died and woke up and I was like, right, here's a list of tasks for you.
Someone's trying to get you to do
I'd
something
be
before you're
fuming.
dead.
I'd be fuming.
No rest for the wicked.
Honestly. No wonder there's dark spirits out there. I'd be a dark spirit. Because if I woke up and I was dead and there was a whole list of tasks here, I was like, right, where do I sign up for the evil side? Where do I fuck some shit up? Where do I become a poltergeist or something?
Just because someone tried to get you to do a job, you owe them. They put you in the ground and all.
What do I owe them for?
You need to pay back Jennings.
That's
Jennings,
their
no.
job. I'm
But
dead, I'm relaxing.
I have a good example. So, a lot of the time, like a lot of magic, like what sets magic apart from mysticism. So, mysticism is the inward path. Mysticism is all about expanding your inner consciousness. But magic's all about, like, fuck inner consciousness. I want some booty. You know what I mean? Magic's not all about, like, wanting something, like being practical. You know what I mean? Using your will and these supernatural forces to get something tangible results. And the Ficcione is a great example of this because people will literally use these spirits, often spirits of the dead, like I said, and it could be something like trying to get someone's hand in marriage. There's a so there's a really good example that's found in the Greek Magickal papyri, which is one of the largest kind of collections of the use of the Ficciones in the Greek Magickal papyri. So a magician basically placed a Defixione. It's not very specific, but it's probably in the grave or either a grave site or a site where multiple people had died because it's references to multiple spirits. But he basically wanted this specific woman. He was just desperate for the ride, basically.
Right. Fair.
A lot of ancient magicians come across as incels, to be honest.
Didn't have Tinder back then, so you just had to put a tablet in a grave.
Yeah. I mean, but how desperate you need to be? Like, he's like, I could ask her out, but you know what? I'm gonna have the spirits of the dead to hunt her until she, like, comes to me.
It's the ancient equivalent of being at a fucking teenage disco and going to your mate, here, ask her to meet me, will you? It's like, here, will you meet me,
Yeah,
mate?
only your mate is
You do
the
it to a
damned
spirit.
soul of
Yeah.
someone. But
It's much cooler.
yeah, so the specific aim, so to quote, so this would have been actually found written under the Ficcione. So it had the aim of binding her brain, her hands, and her intestines and genitals and her heart to love me. This guy was not fucking around.
I mean, the intestines bit is a bit weird.
Yeah, well, it's just the whole idea, like, her very body is, like, bound to him. Magicians out there, erotic magic is not good. You know what I mean? If you're trying, look, I respect the hustle. You know what I mean? Magic has been, like I said, from the dawn of time, it's been about getting booty. You know what I mean? But, like, even if it's metaphysical and stuff like that, always use consent. Don't be an asshole. Don't be using spirits of the dead to try to get people to go out with you.
Don't be trying to get people's intestines to love you.
Yeah. Dude, love your own intestines. But yeah, so he wanted to use, to quote again, the boys here who have died prematurely. How dark is that? So, like, he literally just like, I like this girl. Yeah, she's pretty good looking. I'm gonna get these dead children to be like, here, you have to go out with your man, or we're gonna keep haunting you. Like, so fucking yeah. And with that same one, there was actually like, it actually wasn't a tablet. It was a papyrus that was folded up into a clay vessel. And it was buried in the cemetery, presumably by the grave of some prematurely dead boys. And beside it, often with the Ficciones, there was, I can't remember the name of them, but they've been wrongly called voodoo dolls. Not voodoo dolls, but like clay figures depicting the magician having sex with this woman. So he's a top dog. He has gone up on the incel tier. He is. I mean, look, it's better than shooting people. So, like,
I mean, yeah.
But he basically put these clay statues in with the grave too. You know what I mean? So, and then a lot of the time, a bone or something or graveyard dirt, which you'll find again is very common in a lot of folk magic. a bone or graveyard or something from the grave was taken to have like a magical link. You know what I mean? It's like taking a bit of hair from someone, have a magical link to the spirit. You know,
Right.
it's almost like holding a bit of them hostage.
Bit fucking weird though, isn't it?
Oh, magic's a bit fucking weird. We're literally talking about.
Yeah, but no, like this, like specifically being like, right, I want this bitch to love me. Gives a bit your bone. I'm gonna take a bit
Yeah,
your bone.
well, people use necromancy because there's something more achievable to them. Like, well, I can use the dead because they're like, it's basically like ambient energy. What are they doing? You know what I mean? I can use.
Nothing else to be doing, so.
Yeah, exactly. You know, there's nothing else to be doing, and like, death is everywhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's literally so common. But one of the reasons why I love Ficciones, is the fact that it's just like wild evidence that everyone and their nanny's dog was doing magic back in the day.
Mad
Like,
for a bit, magic.
yeah, like um there was roughly over like probably 1,600 Ficciones being found. Kind of like, and that's only really like in Greece. That's only in Greece. There's more around the world. But yeah, the cool thing about Ficciones is that it shows how prevalent not just magic was, specifically death magic was, like from all different parts of the. It wasn't just people who, because the idea of them just engraving onto a tablet, it's not just about. It's quite accessible. Do you know what I mean? So everyone was doing it. You had like the plebeians doing it. You had the priests doing it. Everyone from different like emperors, different parts of society. They're all at it. You know, they're all putting like desecrating people's graves and putting clay in them. Yeah. So like I said, if like the magician who was desperate for the ride, a lot of the time it could just be like about summoning dead spirits, but sometimes they'd use a deity, like we were talking about, full circle, like we were talking about the Babylonians, that connection with the gods and the dead being the intermediaries. But if they were dedicated deities, those deities would be like Hades, Persephone, Charon, Hecate. But not only are they, sometimes it'd be gods like Janus, who was a Roman god of basic doorways, two-faced god. Normally be any god that had, even if it wasn't direct involvement to death, it would be like to do a transitional state. And we'll come back to that. So yeah, moving on around the world, we're going kind of northern Europe. So Scandinavian have a little bit of necromancy going on for them. So in a lot of Scandinavian folklore, there's a kind of an umbrella term, a variety of kind of undead creatures called draugr, right? The term kind of draugr was only really used in later medieval texts, which is like retrospectives on Scandinavian folklore. But in most sagas and stuff like that, they would be called, you know, whatever they call them, and like depending on where it is, because Scandinavia is a massive, you know what I mean? So like in it might be referred to as like a barrow dweller in one language, or an again walker in a different another language. But most of the things, even though there's different things that separate them, the main thing that if Draugr is under the umbrella term is that they're reanimated corpses, you know? So now we're kind of moving away from the idea of spirits and stuff, and we're talking about physical, like undead things.
Zombies.
A bit like zombies, yeah. So in Iceland, for example, right, and Icelandic magic is so well documented. It's like hardcore, yeah. Shout out to, I've never been, I'd love to go, but shout out to the Icelandic Museum of Witchcraft and Sorcery. I'm constantly on that website.
That in Iceland?
I hope so.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, it might not
It
be.
is in Iceland, yeah.
It might not be.
Why would it be anywhere else?
Why wouldn't it be? Why is there a US embassy in Dublin?
Because that's to do with politics, it's not a fucking museum.
Yeah, but you could have a museum for something else somewhere else.
Yeah, but never mind. Yeah, so in Iceland, these draugrs are called, and again, laughable pronunciation, Aftorganga, which means again walker, right? right? So in Icelandic witchcraft, there's the idea of raising one of these things and after a ganger and having to wrestle it to the ground so it follows your commands.
That's sick.
Yeah,
You need to assert your dominance over it.
pretty much. You know what I mean? How heavy metal is that? But so in 1652, there was a man named Jean. I'm not even gonna try this. John Rognavaldsen.
Perfect.
Rognavaldsen.
Perfect.
Oh, as a native Iceland
Yeah,
beverage,
I'm half ice.
You're half ISIS.
Icish.
Um, Icelandic pick.
Icelandish.
Yeah, so in 1652, a man named John Ragdolfsson. Um, what? I gave an honest attempt.
No, it was a great attempt.
So he was actually the first man. You're gonna feel in like an asshole for laughing now. He was actually the first man to be burnt alive in the infamous Icelandic witch trials.
What did he do?
Poor El Ragdolfsson.
What did he get burned for?
He was accused of an act of necromancy.
And did he do it?
I don't know. Probably not. We talked about this.
But are you telling me, like, if you, alright, that's hypothetically, if some townspeople came across you, man, what was his name? Ivan Ragnatan.
John Rognals. John Rodnelsson.
John
Slowly degrading into just nonsense.
John Ronald.
Ron Jeremy.
Yeah. So these townspeople came across Ron Jeremy, Icelandic Ron Jeremy. And he's knelt over some dead body in the middle of a field, pissing down raining, and he's wrestling with this dead body, chatting like a fucking maniac. Right? Are you telling me that you're one of these townspeople, right? You're not gonna be like, fucking, the fuck's this lad on?
Yeah, but this is what I'm saying. He probably wasn't even found doing that. They probably, either the church or like the townsfolk just didn't like him, or they were suspicious of them, so they were like, must be a witch.
Oh, well, that's different. No, I'm
That,
saying
but that's most instances of like witch hunts are that. You know
okay.
what I
Well,
mean?
if it's that, then that's poor form from the ISIS. But
The Icelandic.
if he was found doing it, it's on him. That's all.
He most likely wasn't.
All right. Well, if he wasn't, then I'm sorry, John.
Ron Jeremy. But yeah, he was basically accused of raising up this corpse, wrestling it, and basically telling it to go hunt down and kill his enemies. And there's kind of in Icelandic folklore, there's actually different ways to stop a draugr. Iron scissors on the corpse's chest, for example. Twigs hidden in their clothes. There's like a runic binding spell. There's this really cool idea called a corpse door. So it's like they blindfold the corpse. I could be miscoding now, but I'm pretty sure it's like they blindfold the corpse or something, and they basically take it through a secret entrance of the grave. So when they take the blindfold off, the corpse was to come back to life. They're like, oh, where am I? I don't know how I got here. I don't know the way out. But yeah, and also sticking pins in corpses' feet. I think it's killed so the corpses can't walk. Like, this is how paranoid these people were about the dead coming back to life.
So glad I didn't die back then. I'd be so pissed off. Waking up, getting messages, you have pins in your feet, you have twigs on you. The twigs would be annoying too.
Yeah, you're just trying to chill in your coffin, like.
Yeah, no, chilling up in heaven. Wake up in heaven, you're like, fuck, they fucking dirt all over me.
A lot of ancient form of necromancy, anyway. It wasn't all about personal gain. Like I said, a lot of magic is about personal gain, but sometimes it'll be about, you know, whether it was the deficiones or some sort of form of magic from another part of the world. But sometimes it could be about, you know, helping people who've died young, like pass on, they died in a violent manner or whatever, to help them pass on. A lot of that idea, we see it with Jewish mysticism, early Jewish mysticism, like pre-Kabbalah. The idea of incantation bowls, which are kind of placed in graveyards to kind of help spirits, kind of pass on. So they might have like a Hebrew. They could also be used to bind demons, but mainly they might be buried. And the whole idea is like there's like incantations written around the bowl and stuff. And that brings us to Abrahamic religion, and this is where the Old Testament, yeah.
I know
Yeah.
Abraham.
So this is where necromancy really kind of starts to get mixed up a little bit. So in the Old Testament, or more accurately the Hebrew Bible, there's a good example of King Saul. He's the first king of Israel, right? He goes to a necromancer called the Witch of Endor. Not, I know you're thinking, not the planet where the Ewoks come from. Endor is an old Canaanite city,
Okay.
but she wasn't. I mean, you can visualize her as an Ewok if you want, but with the little skull on and stuff like that.
I actually love the idea of that. I love King Saul rocking up to a little Ewok.
Yeah, yeah. So he goes to the Witch of Endor and he's like, "Look, I'm at war at the moment, and it's not going super great. Do you mind just summoning the owl,
Ewok.
yeah, the owl Ewoks? Do you mind summoning the prophet Samuel there, just to tell him, like just so I could get advice, you know?" And she does necromancy. It's not really described that much in detail, but she raises up Prophet Samuel from the dead, and Prophet Samuel won't go into too much, but he basically tells him that he's fucked. But
Imagine going through all that and then
I know, right?
despair coming up like, yeah, nah, you're done. You're cooked. It's over.
Yeah. So from here, we see that it's not a very black and white relationship. Abrahamic religions, especially Christianity and Judaism, they have a kind of tricky relationship with necromancy, like they do with most magic, but especially necromancy. Because I mean, Christianity did start off as a death cult. So, yeah,
Really?
yeah, you're talking about like ancient Rome and stuff like that. Like you're talking about when Christians were, um, prosecuted for being Christians, when they were captured and put in the Colosseums and just burnt and stuff. They would have been like hanging out in graveyards, meeting up in graveyards at night, and like bones of saints, like martyrs who have died for their cause. They were like the original saints, and they'd be like worshipping these bones. But like ancient Roman people were like, they have no context for that, so they're just like, what the fuck? They're necromancers, like, you know what I mean? So technically, yeah, it kind of started off as a death cult.
I could. No, that's the kind of Christianity I could have got into. Like that.
What,
sounds sick.
being hunted until you're dead, and then just like, oh, one of me mates died. He gave his life
No,
for his
not
cause.
that. But like
Gonna
being
worship his femur.
in a graveyard at midnight, fucking
Yeah, it's
wearing
heavy.
some bones. I'd
It-
be well up for that.
Yeah, like early Christianity is
Bet they weren't eating some
hardcore.
fucking bread on a Sunday.
Okay, we're moving on. Let's leave the Eucharist out of this. I mean, there is that kind of connection, though. The whole idea of like the blood and body of Christ.
They probably had real blood.
I don't think it was that metal. But yeah, Christianity has a tricky relationship with kind of raising spirits of the dead, and they kind of pretty early on they kind of start shitting on the whole idea, just so they could do what they do best, scaring people, you know, and scaring people good. They kind of suggest that like I use can't, because like the whole idea of like, especially early days, like we can't have people believing that they can just pluck dead people from the earth. You know what I mean? What about heaven and hell and all? Like, no, you actually aren't summoning dead people. You are actually summoning demons who are in the form of, which is scary if you think about. That's not your nanny. That's actually a demon, the form of your dead nanny. Because necromancy was so just common in the ancient world and stuff like that, and the whole idea of talking to the dead was so it just made sense. You know what I mean? Because this is where the term necromancer just kind of becomes associated with anyone who summons like demons or whatever, or anything that's like kind of magic in general, but mainly like dark magic, and that's important. And we'll come back to another podcast.
You know how you're saying about how the Christians were like, that's not your nanny. That's a demon.
Yeah,
Is that where? Because you see this like as a common theme in like horror movies.
exactly. That's
where
where that
it's
comes
like
from.
the demon will always manifest itself as a little girl or a little kid or something. Is that where like that basis comes from?
Kind of, yeah. It's the whole idea that it was basically just trying to, like I said, scare people, to stop people from doing it. So it was like, This isn't something familiar. This isn't a dead person. This isn't human. Remember, we were talking about the divine wouldn't possibly know what humans would want, so they use dead. It's removing that. It's like there's no human behaviors here. There's no like relatability with the spirits of the dead. No, this is something scary, and that's like the point I was trying to make. This is where that kind of transition is where now not look there was always a spiritual hierarchy like gods, like different spirits from shamanistic cultures and all. But when Christianity comes along and when they start getting mixing up necromancy with necromancy and all becomes the one thing, this is where the start of the evolution of like demonic magic and the Gaucher and the Key of Solomon and all, that's where this all starts to come together. The Christians are Anton LaVey, may rest in peace, the founder of the Church of Saints, had a very good saying where he says the devil is the best friend the church has ever had. They kept them in business for all these years, and it's very true when
I've heard that before.
Yeah, it's very true when it comes to magic because
Yeah.
when you tell someone not to do something,
They're gonna do
they're
it.
gonna do it. And Christianity, woo, they did it a lot, especially with magic. And we'll get to that because some of the biggest necromancers who've ever existed, who kind of perpetuated that art form, were in fact priests. But we'll get to that. So in Leviticus chapter 20, verse 27, it reads, "A man or woman who is a medium or wizard shall be put to death. They shall be stoned, with their stoned blood shall be upon them." So that goes to show that you're anyway different, you're getting stoned, not a good way. The first time the word necromancer, and this is where it all kicks off, is kind of mentioned in the Bible is in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 18, verses 10 to 11. It says, "There shall be not found among you anyone who burns his son or daughter as an offering, anyone who practices divination, a soothsayer, or an augur, or a sorcerer, or a charmer, or a medium, or a wizard, or a necromancer." That's the big movie title. It's the first time when that word is used in a Christian context. Or it wouldn't be Christian back then, but like in an Abrahamic context.
Just in that, or in any text?
Probably in text before that, it'd be their culture's version of it, or like the original Greece, like necromancy or whatever. Yeah, so you think that would kind of be the end of it, but like I said, it's not. It's not like necromancy equals bad. Completely wrong. A lot of medieval necromancers were actually clerics. There were people in the lower orders of the clergy. Because if you think about it, it makes sense because they're the people who had the education. You know what I mean? They could read Latin. They learned the kind of the theological context. They would know about demons and all this and the spiritual hierarchy and stuff.
So is this equivalent to like having a little job on the side? Like by day I'm a priest, by night I'm
Pretty
a
much.
necromancer.
It was most places illegal. Do you know what I mean? You could be burned as a witch, but they felt free to do it. You know what I mean? They felt okay doing it because basically they were like, yeah, we're summoning demons, but we're controlling demons under the power of God.
Right.
So that's all right. You know what I mean? We're not actually fucking with the dead people because they're demons, and we're not evil because we're not going to be tempted by the demons because we have the big God fella on our side. So
Well, it's just a bit of a laugh, basically. For them.
yeah, basically, a lot of the time they were college students and stuff like that, experimenting. So we actually know a lot of our information of at least medieval necromancy, which is a lot to do with like demon summoning and stuff like that. It's like the early basis for that stuff before you get into the more like Crowley and stuff. We knew that there was kind of like an underground network almost where they would be like sending letters to each other and stuff like that. Like there was an exchange of information there somehow because different texts references other spells and stuff like that, and they're known as the the clerical necromancer underground, which sounds like a dope band name. But yeah, there's so many books of necromancy out there, but the most notable is the Munich Necromancer Manual and the Medici's Necromancer Manual. With the Medici Necromancer Manual, I think it's still in the Vatican Library to this day. There's not actually a lot of raising of the dead in either of them. A lot of the time, it's actually the breakdown of like illusionary magic, will magic, and stuff like that. But after their kind of magic sort of gets a makeover in the Renaissance period, and necromancy kind of it starts to fade out of the public eye, or at least a lot of the spells are they become different things that kind of transmute different stuff.
The Munich thing, the Munich book, is that actual Munich in Germany, or is it just
Yeah,
the
it
name?
would have been monks in Munich. It has another name, like a more active, like CSM. I can't remember the actual name for it, but it's just commonly known as the Munich.
Christianity in Germany?
Yeah, this would have been before. This would have been pre Lutheranism, so pre
Oh, fair, yeah.
Protestantism. It never necromancy never died. Um, ironically enough.
Yeah.
It kind of like this in the 19th century. The spiritualism movement came along, and then spiritism movement, which we'll do episodes in the future, and both of them are different things. But we have, Ouija boards, seances and stuff like that. Like that all kind of came around, and that couldn't have happened. You know what I mean? Like you messing with a Ouija board at a sleepover, that couldn't have happened without some dirty magician in ancient like Greco-Roman Egypt who just had a horn on, taking the bones of children and putting a clay thing in a grave. So every time you mess with a Ouija board, right? Every time every time you go to your nan's grave, right? Think of that magician who was using dead people to get a ride. Okay, so there you've heard the history of necromancy.
Have.
Like, what do you think? Was it kind of what you were expecting, or?
No, it wasn't. The whole Christianity thing blew my mind. To be honest, because that I wasn't expecting any tie-ins there. I wasn't too shocked with the whole Greek area of it. Kind of expect that they were mad fuckers back then. They were doing everything, so and especially their connection to their gods and everything. So you'd expect them sort of to be communicating back and forth and been doing those kind of things. The whole lover thing was weird with the intestines and stuff.
Yeah,
And the fact that it went as far north, like as like Scandinavia, I never really made the connection with Draugrs and necromancy like before, but like it makes sense. Like if you think about it, I was like, fuck yeah, that is necromancy, that is raising the dead. So fuck.
Yeah, it's because that. I mean, look, that's when you're scratching the surface. We
Yeah,
didn't talk about like different, like nearly every culture has their whole idea of like talking to the dead. You know what I mean? Like we didn't. Again, we'll do it a different podcast, but we didn't even talk about voodoo. We didn't talk about their idea of zombies and stuff like that. But yeah, there's definitely more to it. A lot of something that I find interesting is that like a lot of kind of academics and stuff like that, and like kind of modern magicians today, especially this one of the sources that I was using for this episode, techniques of Greco-Roman magic. The author, that Stephen Skinner, he actually kind of brought this idea to my mind. I was watching a video that he was doing, like a talk he was doing about his book. But a lot of people actually think this. A lot of magicians and stuff think that they kind of think that there's not really much use of talking to the dead because they're kind of like, what would they know? You know what I mean? Which, right, that's fair enough. You know what I mean? But I'm kind of I like to kind of challenge that, and I'm like, well, the reason why kind of people did it so much is obviously death. Like their perspective of death is completely different where we have it now. You know what I mean? It's a lot more common, and it was a lot more of a risk. You know, but also like, oh, well, I suppose in that's me speaking from a privileged position in our part of the world. But yeah, it's the whole idea of like using the dead, that they are beyond physical limitations. You know what I mean? They can like find lost treasure, they can spy people, they can hunt people, but they can do kind of whatever. Do you know what I mean? But I like the idea of like using that human element. You know what I mean? Like rather than like having to talk to this being, stuff like this alien being or whatever, you're talking to something very human. You know what I mean?
Well, the concept that they're using humans as a go between gods, that's something that again, it hadn't really crossed my mind as that's what they were doing. But when you think about it, it makes sense.
Yeah,
and
it's
it
a
does
really
make
cool
it a lot
idea.
more comfortable.
Yeah. So I suppose we'll talk about kind of practices of this is the fun part. So some of my experiences with necromancy and kind of just like general practices and stuff. So I suppose first off, a lot of necromancy, like no matter what, I mean, kind of back in the day. So this would be talking about like before when it started medieval necromancy, before it got mixed up with necromancy, like specifically just talking to the dead. It'd be all about surrounding yourself with aspects of death, paired with different various incantations. So a good example I actually found in the Encyclopedia of Magic and Alchemy by Rosemary Guiley. So they kind of would use a lot of like basically anything goth, just really goth. Like it's as you kind of think like like talking to the dead. You're like obviously, do you know what I mean? Like it's not going to be that obvious. But no, it really is that obvious. It is just what you think it is. It's literally just hanging around in a graveyard shouting at a gravestone. You know, that's not what I did, but that's basically what they did. So like gathering stuff like black or stale foods around you, like stale bread, unfermented wine, kind of wearing the clothes of the dead person.
Decapitating squirrels.
I don't decapitate squirrels. You need to get that out of your head.
I still don't believe it.
But yeah, wearing the clothes of dead people, or sometimes even mutilating and giving the corpse a little bit of a nibble. You know,
Decapitating squirrels.
the whole idea of I'm ignoring that. The whole idea of like eating bits of the dead, and that kind of makes sense if you think about it, like the whole idea. And I have not eaten dead people. I've eaten dead animals. Yeah, so it makes sense to me. Sorry, going back to eating bits of the dead. You know what I mean? Like having, like we were talking about with that magician who took the bone, you know what I mean, to have that magical link, so it's inside of you now. So normally these kind of ceremonies that take place in graveyards or where people died and crossroads, like we talked about and stuff.
Didn't you have allegedly have the head of a magpie or something?
It was not allegedly. I could say that. I can say that.
Okay.
Yeah, a skull of a. It was a crow actually.
It was a crow.
Skull of a crow. We're gonna come back to that because I'm gonna talk about the. Not the same crow, but I'm gonna be talking about dead crows again.
A different crow.
Yeah, different crows. I don't kill crows.
Decapitating squirrels and crows.
Yeah, so like there's a lot of different like traditions to choose from with necromancy, but with a lot of them for me something that I notice is kind of about like asserting authority. Do you know what I mean? Like asserting authority, or there's an exchange of some sort. Whether that exchange is like asserting authority, like wrestling the Draugr, do you know what I mean, or giving instructions, specifically instructions and stuff like that. Or if it's like giving some sort of offering, do you know what I mean, to the dead, or like leaving something behind, or taking something. There's always an exchange with most magic. Do you know what I mean? But I think it's quite clear with necromancy. It's one of the reasons I want to talk about it first. To kind of talk about kind of my experience with necromancy. So I suppose like I don't, like I said, I practice chaos magic. So it means that I actually practice a bit of everything, like ceremonial magic and all. But a lot of the times when I'm doing like a type of magic, I try to find, and I try not to make it like to be like cultural appropriation. You know what I mean? I do it within reason, you know. But like I take some different examples of say necromancy from this culture. Do you know what I mean? Some different examples of necromancy from that culture. Do you know what I mean? Or just from different magical systems and stuff, and kind of like mix them up with it to make it my own. Do you know what I mean? So I suppose I've only really had two big examples of. I have used it as fictione. I won't go into too detail about this, but I've made I don't have lead lying around. So I used a little bit of clay. And I had kind of a friend who will not be named, but they had a little bit of an injustice done to them. It wasn't a criminal thing. It wasn't actually that serious at all. It was just a kind of a bit of a social thing, a social injustice, let's say. But I was basically, synchronicities. I was walking around this graveyard, basically, and I came across a grave, and it was actually a grave of an old judge, because it actually said on the gravestone. 'Cause sometimes they say if they're old enough, they'll say their occupation. So I did a little bit of research on the judge, mainly to just what I could find on some of the records on like Fingal County Council or whatever it was. Just to mainly find out if he wasn't a slave owner or anything like that. But I then I made this defixione and I put it in this grave, and then it was like a day after that friend kind of got an apology from the person who'd done them injustice, and like they didn't really like have any conceit why they were apologizing. Like they still kind of felt the same way with their position on the argument, but they couldn't kind of explain. And that was actually one of my first, not my first instance of magic, one of my first instances of like, oh, might be something to this. You know what I mean? It could be a coincidence, but still. Now my other one, which I did quite recently, I used. This is more kind of ceremonial magic. This is a bit more trippy. I was kind of, I frequent St. Anne's Park a lot, and I was walking along, and there's kind of this little area where there's it's almost a crossroads. It probably was at some point, but one side of it leads to like a tree, and another side leads down a path, and then other leads back into the woods, and then other bit leads into a bush. But in the middle of this kind of semi crossroads was just a dead crow, right? Just rotten there. It was just all bones, a few feathers. I saw this crow, and I was kind of like, the podcast coming up, we're gonna do thing on necromancy, so we're gonna try do something a bit big here. So I would recommend, if you are gonna do this stuff, don't use human bones. Do you know what I mean? It's illegal. Like, don't break into graves.
Unless
Don't-
you killed them yourselves.
Yeah, just keep that to yourself.
Yeah.
Don't get us involved. But
If you're looking for advice, send an email to the hocusholepodcast@gmail.com.
yeah,
will
how
let you
to
know
bury
how
a body.
How to clean up dead bones.
But like I've never harmed anything. You know what I mean? Like an animal or anything. But
Other than squirrel.
stop. But poor squirrels. But look, dead animals are easy enough to find. Just put a pair of gloves on. You know what I mean? Pick it up. Just take a small part of it, and then go home, dilute some bleach with some kind of hot water, like with just some lukewarm water, and just bleach it in and just clean it. You know what I mean? Just be careful, but like it's much easier. I know a lot of people. I've had some people say to me like, "Oh, but Dara, it's an animal." Do you know what I mean? So you're not just gonna like raise up the spirit of a crow, and it's just gonna be like ka ka. But my logic behind it is that kind of my belief, and this is all what magic is, it's making your belief reality. You know what I mean? Making your thoughts reality. Is that even if they're an animal, you know what I mean? They'll be able to speak because they're beyond the physical limitations beyond their biological limitations. You know what I mean? It like, why wouldn't it be able to speak? That makes sense to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's also, for me, it's like we're all the whole idea of Dance Macabre. We're all equal in the eyes of death. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor or a man or a beast. We're all the same. So, yeah, so why wouldn't we all be able to speak? You know what I mean? Come back to the dead bones. But at the time I was kind of researching for this podcast and stuff, I was getting into stuff about ancient Israelite magic and Jewish mysticism, and I came across the idea of the incantation bowls, which I mentioned before. Um, and like they said, they'd be left in cemeteries to help the souls of the dead move on, and they could also be used to bind demons and stuff. And then that's when I kind of thought, there's something I can feel a plan forming. So Lee, I'm gonna just hand you a little artifact here, and I want you to describe what I've just given you to our lovely audience.
Right. So what I have in my hands here is a bowl with a massive chip taken out of it. So imagine your bowl, and then around the edge there's like a triangular chip taken out of it. Definitely a scallion. A bit of dirt in the middle of it. Around the outsides we have some writing. Nepus on one side, and some markings. And we have a lot of symbols on the inside. In there's this trademark silver marker. There's a silver marker, is it? And there's some stuff on the bottom as well.
Yeah, so that's the incantation ball. So in the middle of it is the writing around it, and I'll post this picture on the Hocusholepodcast page. I started off writing, so I wrote the incantation that I wrote, and I wrote it around the bowl, and with great difficulty. But I wrote in Hebrew, and then I wrote it again, but I used ancient Egyptian demotic script, which is like the start of the first kind of pre-Egyptian language. And I got an ancient demotic translator online, and I added demotic characters to the Hebrew, so it's a mixture of demotic and Hebrew. So it's like I'm paying tribute to the fact that it's a kind of Hebrew idea, the incantation bowl, but also, like we said about the ficciones and stuff, dedicating a god. So like, just as much you can use you basically using a god to get spirits of the dead. So I thought of a god. I'd been having dreams at the time, right? A lot of dreams that are kind of like about like boats and like lakes of fire and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, that reminds you of like the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and like talking about the whole idea of the afterlife. And then that prompted me to kind of like read up on this kind of stuff. And then I kind of found out about Nephthys, who is the Egyptian god of mourning, basically. Not mourning as in like
Morning. Grieving.
wake up sunshine, as in like grieving, being Visad. So a little bit about Nephthys. She's the sister wife of Set, both
Right.
sister and his wife.
Keep it in the family.
So Set's the god of chaos. And her whole idea is she was a goddess of mourning and of household. And she guides the soul to the Egyptian afterlife, also known as Dua. The reason why I kind of chose her, not just because I thought it was a cool idea, but also like her whole idea is that she guides the spirits through the dangers of the afterlife, and it's all about like mournfulness and the sadness, but it's also kind of about like mourning and kind of embracing new beginnings. But I kind of like the idea of like, oh, so if she's kind of like this benevolent guide, I was like, well, maybe I could kind of ask her, be like, kind of have like an offering to her, a homage to her, and he'd be like, look, could you bring back one of your souls for me? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kind of like she's sort of like she's not a fairy woman, but in that kind of way. Do you know what I mean? Like taking them across the river.
Well, the crow is probably still on the ferry.
What you mean?
Probably only recently dead.
Yeah, exactly.
He's probably still on the trip.
That's one way of looking at it, and also crows in Egyptian mythology sometimes, or more so Egyptian folklore. It's not really in some variety of Egyptian mythology. They're seen as the messengers of souls. You know what I mean? They're seen as the crows fly to the afterlife of souls. Actually, also there's a bird connection with this because Nephthys is depicted. You see on the bowl there, just on the back, there's a bad drawing of a hieroglyphic that's meant to be. So Nephthys is depicted as a woman with hawk wings, and on her head she is holding a On her head she's holding up like a clay jar that would be like traditionally you have water clay jar or bowl, just like the bowl and like an incantation bowl, like a bowl or a clay jar that would be like to collect water. But it's also the little jar looks like a little house too.
This?
Yeah, that thing there. Again, I'll post up these
I was
little
looking
pictures
on the
online.
inside.
Fuck's sake. But yeah, there's a bird connection there too because she has hawk, and also hawks are known. She's hawk wings, and hawks are known for their kind of mournful cries. So yeah, so I made the bowl. It was like a smashed up bowl, and I glued it back together. I'm like MacGyver. I'm like a magical MacGyver or something. So I went to the park. It was actually during Mabon, actually this solstice. I went on a harvest moon, dead of night. Went in. I did my lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. A circle of salt, kind of cleansed the area, saged the place up, and then I had before that. Previously, I had gone with the bowl, the incantation, and I'd buried it in that spot. Not too deep. It was actually that's why there's a chip missing off because it was poking out of the ground. But I buried it in the ground in this spot where I found the crow at the crossroads, right? And I came back about 3 days later. I think it was either 3 or 4. But I had also buried with it the Neseti sigil, which I'll also post on Instagram, which is one of the Icelandic staves used for night sitting at crossroads, right? So I placed that in with it too. So when I went back after I had the circle of salt and all, I dug up the bowl, dusted it off, and then my ritual kind of began. So I placed the bone, which was like the leg bone of this crow, like little tiny leg bone. I placed it into the bowl. Cinnamon, which is a bit of cinnamon was burnt because that's also a big long history on cinnamon, their connection to spirits. Wax of a black candle dripped onto the bone. I threw in some coins and stuff. Dark rum, and these are all kind of offerings to both the dead and to the goddess, to Nephthys. So about after an hour of me kind of meditating around this bowl. Now I'm in the park on my own, do you know what I mean? At night time. It's fucking scary.
Yeah, it is.
You know what I mean?
I can't confirm it is.
Yeah. It's dodgy but eventually I kinda hear birds moving in the trees and just wind and stuff like that, oral stuff. About 20 minutes later, there's a lot more cawing and flapping. There's a lot more birds. So I'm a little bit freaked out. But for me, magic is all about if you see something weird, it's not just to get freaked out. It's like to go beyond that. Like keep on going, you know? Yeah, so I'm hearing all this cawing and flapping and about I started repeating it. I was like, right, something that was a sign. Like something's kind of happening now. So I started repeating the incantation in my head, which I had memorized off. And just kind of mentally going over and over in my head. I don't know how long had passed, getting a bit cold, but I was just kneeling there repeating it. Started to get into a little bit of a trance. Now I want to preface that I was completely sober and everything. I was in a complete sober state of mind. And I kind of started to visualize this purposely, kind of as I was chanting, I was trying to visualize the goddess, but as I was doing it, it kind of formed itself, and I visualized this kind of steaming river. I couldn't really see anything; it was just steam, but I could see the water that it was gray, whitish steam, but the water was almost like a metallic. you know what I mean? Like almost silver, kind of. And from this water emerged this really fucking tall, pale woman with gigantic hawk wings that were just spreading behind her, like with water just dripping off her. And she was carrying a little clay bowl on her head that looked like it had a little house, a little cute like door and window and stuff like that. And it looked like it was like dry clay, but like the wet clay at the bottom was like matted in her black hair, and her eyes looked like television static. So she's kind of walking towards me in this sort of vision, I suppose. Um, Eventually, as I'm saying this mantra, because I'm thinking about this, I'm visualizing this thing. So the mantra starts to become a bit jumbled and stuff like that. I sort of lose concentration and stuff. Again, there's the use of barbarous words. I'm saying this mantra and it becomes something else. It becomes like nonsense words, like magic words, you know. Then eventually, I open my eyes and then I got the Necromancy sigil for the crossroads sitting and I burnt it into the bowl. And we'll talk about sigil work again, but basically the whole idea of like having this sigil, drawing a sigil, or meditating with a sigil, and then like you're imbuing your will into it, and eventually when you get to the right moment, you're burning it, you're destroying it, you're doing something to it, and it's like a spark. Do you know what I mean? It's like the spark that lights the fuse. You know. So I burnt it in this bowl and it's burning away. I have candles around me and stuff, and then I pour a bit of dash of rum in it, and obviously the fire roars up, and there's just smoke fucking everywhere, right? And then through the smoke, I see kind of a vague outline. Now, it could have been a tree or whatever, stuff like that, but I suppose kind of a vague shape. And there's still an awful lot of cawing going on around me. And I suppose I'm in a park. I just buried a bowl and dug it back up again. Why not? So I decided to question this crow. Yeah, and we had a polite conversation. He was very polite for a dead crow. And I asked him how he died, and we just kind of got on. It was more like an experiment more than anything. I didn't really have any. I didn't want to know any specific off of the crow. You know what I mean? Normally, when I'm doing these things, there would be a reason for it. But this is more so an experiment for the podcast.
Did he tell you how he died?
More or less, it was quite cryptic.
Sure.
But again, even if he was, it could just be like a manifestation of my subconscious. That's another theory of magic. But he basically told me that he fucked up his wing. And he was just hopping around the park the whole time, and then he just got dehydrated, which I suppose that sounds pretty plausible.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was a little bit startled. Obviously he's not in a lot of summoning. There's the whole idea of like the conjure. So I was within a circle of salt. I had some stones actually that I found pasted around it too. But the whole idea with summoning is that the magician's inside of a circle, and then the magician or witch or whatever you want to call them is inside the circle, and then the spirit or whatever is outside, but normally they're confined in, like, if it's the triangle of art for demon summoning or whatever, so they have to follow your commands. But this thing was just outside the circle, so it was free to do what it wanted. But it meant me no harm and stuff. But after our little conversation, I dismissed it. I buried the bone, and I kind of like got a bit of graveyard dirt. I tried to mention it before. There's graveyard dirt in before.
Yeah.
And I put out kind of remainders of the fire with the graveyard dirt, and yeah, kind of went about my way. So that was my experience with summoning Brandon Lee from The Crow. Good old Brandon Lee.
Brilliant.
But yeah, I suppose like it is doable. That is my kind of big working of it. Like, but there's little ways of doing it. Like, I suppose, even starting off, like, go out to a graveyard and just collect a little bit of graveyard dirt. It's not beyond. It's not too weird to, like. I suppose we all everyone who listens to this probably has someone close to them in some capacity who has died, and we've all talked to a grave before. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So maybe just, even if it's someone you don't know, just ask them, like, or just tell them, or like show some sign of respect. You might take a bit of graveyard dirt, and treat that with respect too. Don't just throw it in a tin. You know what I mean? Like, keep it somewhere. Treat that shit like a tabernacle. Do you know what I mean? Like, keep it in like a nice little box or whatever. Do you know? Be nice to your dirt.
Go down to your nanny's grave and take some dirt.
Yeah, be a good lad and take some dirt from your nanny's grave.
Guess your nanny's dirt. Come on. If she's not dead yet, it won't be long.
I do think there is there's kind of that link going back to ancestor worship, going back to the very start, just kind of to top it all off. I do think that nowadays we have a very different. We're afraid of death, you know what I mean? There's a morbidity about it, you know? So I find that in kind of modern society today, there's a lot of, like, death is sort of, it's viewed in a kind of morbid way, and we're kind of afraid of it, you know what I mean? But I really admire cultures that sort of embrace the whole idea. They're not trying to deny death. You know what I mean? If anything, they're trying to remind themselves of it, you know? They don't think that's necessarily, and I don't mean like, oh, you're gonna die, you better get that car, you better get that job, you know what I mean? Like, not the inevitability about it, but in a more kind of almost hedonistic way. So you'll see with a lot of ancestor worship and stuff like that in different, I don't know, like folk religions and stuff. There's a lot of, like, you might go to your grave, to your own grave. I mean, you might go to someone else. It's like that bit in Anchorman too, where your man Brick turns up to his own funeral. I would do that. I'd turn up to my own funeral.
I wouldn't. Fuck that. I already have a list of shit I need to do.
Oh yeah, you fucking Defixione, yeah.
Fucking, I don't
Can't
have
even
time
to
to go
my
to my
funeral.
funeral.
Jeez, you are fuming about that, aren't you?
I'd be pissed.
It looks like you already are fuming about it. You're not even dead yet. Because you know that if you die before me, I'm definitely.
You'll fucking do some shit like that.
Yeah. Go on, Lee, go.
You do that, I'll hunt the fuck. I don't care how many circles of salt you put around you.
Man, it'd be salt everywhere. It'd be a salty cunt. Be loads.
I'll be a salty spirit. I'll be pissed.
But I'll just sage you. I'll banish you. I'll banish you to the shadow realm.
Does that mean I don't have to do your shit then?
Yeah, I suppose.
There you go. So banish me, all you want.
Right, I'm glad we reached that agreement. But yeah, you might go to, like, not your own grave, but like someone's grave, and you might, you put a picture of them. You might put, their favorite football team or whatever. Like a jersey or whatever, like something they really like. Well, I like the idea of, and again, going back to ancient Egypt, we're talking about, like, your desert island disc. Like, what are you taking to your afterlife?
Yeah.
Taking your phone to heaven, you know? Yeah, basically to tie it all up, it would be like bringing the whole idea of the ancient Egyptians, where you can bring your you can bring, like, different things to the afterlife. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes they used to have slaves buried with them. You know what I mean? So you could bring slaves with them. There's also the kind of the idea of, like, the symbolism of that. You know what I mean? Like their favorite football jersey and stuff like that. But also, like, the hedonistic side comes in, like, give them their favorite cigarettes. You know what I mean? Their favorite. That's why, like, Rome is always in associated with a lot of like giving offerings to the dead, because it's like, rum's like a strong alcohol. Do you know what I
Everyone
mean?
likes rum.
I don't like rum, but
Oh,
I don't like rum.
why?
I just don't like it. I'm not
Just
mad
any
about,
rum.
I'm just not mad about spirits. About drinking spirits anyway.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm just not mad about rum. Sorry.
what's wrong with you?
I don't know. I've been asking myself that for a long time.
Kind of a person, eh?
I don't know.
Don't like rum.
Um,
Don't like Malibu.
I'm sure there's plenty. No,
Not like a pina colada.
I just prefer a nice quiet beer. Right? Is that okay?
I'm baffled by this.
Cup of tea. Right?
Right.
But yeah, like rum, cigarettes, food, and stuff like that, because it's the things that the deceased people loved in their life. Do you know what I mean? It's stuff that represents the physical world. And it's kind of like, not only are you celebrating stuff that they like, you know what I mean? You're celebrating the relationship between life and death, because it's like, yeah, cigarettes might fucking kill us or whatever, or like drinking and stuff like that. But I like that irony. There's stuff that it will eventually kill you. Do you know what I mean? But it's like, we're here to celebrate being alive. You know?
What I can imagine now is going back to our desert island of death.
Mm-hmm.
Is you're at that desert island bar, you're just sitting there, you're having your drink, and suddenly there's just a pack of cigarettes beside you. And you're like, fucking hell, cheers. Little note says who it's from.
Yeah, exactly. You know, people sending you a gift. But yeah, I really like the idea of like, it's an acceptance of death. You know what I mean? Like partying at someone's graveside, or like I'm still talking about being respectful, but like giving that kind of like, I think we as a culture, maybe it's an Irish culture, just we should adopt that more. And I'm not talking about like having to put like a packet of Johnny Blue on someone's grave, or like it.
Well, I think that's a thing now, already.
Yeah, it can be.
I mean, I go to my mom's grave, and I fucking, like last Christmas, I went to my mom's grave. I had a can of, you know how you can get the pre-mixed drinks?
Mm-hmm.
I brought her a vodka and Coke one, and I had a Jack and Coke one, and sat and had that with her.
Yeah.
And for my nanny's anniversary, I bring her a can of Guinness because she used to drink Guinness.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's not just mournfulness. It's kind of like, it's accepting that these people have gone on, but it's also like, it's accepting death in a kind of way. You know what I mean? It's accepting these people have gone on, but like recognizing like these are the things that, why death is so important, because we enjoy these things in life. You know what I mean? And I really like that. I think it's really beautiful. And I suppose this episode is coming out on Sound, and Sound. You'll Sound. Yeah, this episode's gonna be today is Sound. Happy Halloween, everyone.
Happy Sound.
Happy Halloween. Now's the perfect time to kind of, think about people who've passed on and stuff like that. But not even that. Just think about like the relationship between life and death. You know what I mean? Think about like that. Things die, but they're not necessarily gone. It's kind of like animism, isn't it? Because it's kind of like, remember I was saying animism's the idea that everything has a soul, Well,
Yeah.
technically that's supported by science. I mean, it might necessarily be a soul, but everything's made out of the same atoms. It's like the first episode we talked about the quantum broccoli, yeah.
Broccoli. I've been thinking about broccoli constantly since that
I'm
episode.
glad I've destroyed your mind.
And Dara knows that as well, because I just constantly send them pictures of broccoli or broccoli memes.
Niche, we're gonna nurture a niche like meme community of broccoli memes.
Broccoli.
But
every time you see broccoli, just think about your place in the universe.
yeah, exactly. That's what I do, man. I'm a veggie. But yeah, we're all made up of the same broccoli. You know what I mean? We're all made up of the same atoms and stuff like that, and the same stardust and everything. And when we die, we rot in the ground or whatever. We biodegrade. Basically, we become compost, and our kind of essence becomes energy. Do you know what I mean? It's the rule of the universe. Matter can't be created or destroyed. It's constantly like keeps on going. So that in a way is kind of a an afterlife. Everything is alive. The relationship between life and death it's kind of beautiful because it's kind of like the clockworks of existence. You know.
What do you want done with you when you die?
I don't know. I've thought about like being burnt, like being cremated, and then just someone bring me to the woods and spreading me around. You know, because then I'm covering a wider surface area that way.
I originally wanted to be cremated, and like it was definitely my idea. But in the last few years, this concept came to me, and I've seen it around. I want to be buried, and I want a tree planted on top of me, and I want to feed
Apparently,
that tree.
that's really expensive. You can do a thing where like they break you down into like a little pod, and then they plant the tree from you.
Like I want an apple tree over me, and I want my grandkids to eat my apples.
That way you live on to your grandkids.
I live on through the apples. But also, I love the idea of not just being an apple tree. Plant me in like an orchard, like with like orchard thieves or like Bulmers or something. Make me into cider. Make the fruit of my body into cider.
Drink of my eat of my body, drink of my blood.
If you outlived me by say like 30,
Right.
40 years, right, and I was buried in an orchard, and you knew that I had been turned into cider, would you drink that cider?
Yeah, man.
I think that'd be
What would your
class.
cider be called? This is a business venture.
Don't know. Irish cunt. I don't
We have
know.
to be dead something.
It would have to be something. Yeah, nanny's casket.
Nanny's casket.
Yeah, nanny's
cider.
casket.
We'll have to start an
Yeah.
advertising campaign and everything. Like I know you're not dead yet, but you might as well.
This podcast is now sponsored by your nanny's casket.
Nanny's casket. Your nanny's casket. Holistic cider. Lovely. Well. On that note,
Yeah.
I think that's the podcast. Have a safe have a safe Halloween, everyone. Be safe out there. Don't eat too much sweeties. Don't. What are those ones? The banshee bones. Don't eat too many banshee bones.
They'll rip them out off you. They will after about 3 or 4 packs. Like,
Talking
you
from
know,
experience, you're just gorging on banshee bones.
actually, I have in when I was up in Belfast on the way back, I went into a newsagent and I found a massive bag of banshee bones. So I just ripped through the whole bag on the bus home. Great, but my mouth was in bits. I still have cuts on the side of my mouth from them.
Well, there's your public safety announcement from Lee.
Be careful with your
Yeah.
banshee bones.
Never mind checking your sweets for razor blades. Check them for banshee bones.
Yeah.
But yeah, be safe out there. And remember your loved ones. Remember that the veils of the other world are thin. And go out there and cause some pagan chaos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Down 100 it. Slán.
Slán. So yeah, we'll be posting all the stuff up on the old web page.
Yeah, keep an eye on our Instagram,
Yeah.
the Hocus Hole Podcast at Instagram.
And any podcast suggestions or anything, episodes, topics, or anything you want, you can email us at the Hocus Hole Podcast.
No, just hocusholepodcast at gmail.com.
Okay.
If you put the in front of it, you won't get us. You'll get someone there, and probably nobody, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, give us an email if you have any feedback or if you have any ideas.
hocusholepodcast@gmail.com.
Hocushole at gmail.com. Hocusholepodcast at gmail.com.
I'll get it right.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah. But email us there or at the Instagram. And give us a like and a follow. And yeah. Have a good one.
Right,
Happy
is that-
Halloween. As above.
So below. Right, we done?
Yeah, we're done.